Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little louder, a little colder, and a lot more airborne. It's the 1940s, the world's on fire. And lucky you, you've just been handed the keys to a flying death trap. That's right, you're a World War II pilot now. Or at least, you will be for as long as the engine holds and you don't forget which switch does what. Now before you buckle in, go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe slide into bed, pull up the covers, and pretend you're not about to hear how absolutely miserable flying in one of history's most romanticised wars really was. Turn on a fan if you've got one. Helps drown out the thoughts. And if you enjoy this kind of slow, factual descent into historical discomfort, consider subscribing. Or don't. That part's optional. Crashing into the ocean at 300 miles per hour? Less so. Leave a comment letting me know what time it is where you're tuning in from. And maybe what you're drinking tonight. Hopefully not wartime instant coffee made from desperation and chalk. That said, thanks for being here. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine this. You're standing on an airfield in the middle of nowhere. It smells like fuel, burnt metal, and the distant scent of someone's very bad decision. Someone just called your name. You look up, confused, tired, 21 years old, and already way too old for this. They're pointing at a plane. They say it's yours. Congratulations, and welcome to the sky. You wake up to shouting. Not the kind of shouting that means breakfast is ready, or that someone left their boots outside again. No, this is the urgent, military-grade yelling that means someone's decided it's your turn to do something dangerous, again. You sit up, and it takes a second to remember where you are. The cot underneath you is barely a step above a wooden plank. Your blanket's the thickness of a tortilla, and your boots still smell like wet leather and powdered death. This is the airfield. It's cold, loud, and somehow dusty and damp at the same time. Outside your tent, an engine coughs to life with a sound like metal regret. Welcome to your new reality. You're a pilot, technically. Which is to say, someone gave you 20 weeks of rush job flight school, a clipboard full of jargon, and a heavy wool uniform that fits like it was designed by someone who'd never seen a human body. You passed a check ride that mostly involved not crashing into the instructor, and now you've been assigned a real aircraft. It's got your name stenciled on the side. Which feels cool for about 5 seconds until you realise they only do that so it's easier to identify the wreckage later. You weren't chosen because you were the best. You were chosen because your vision is good enough, your blood pressure is decent, and you haven't puked during roll call yet. Half the guys around you used to be delivery drivers, farmhands, or high school gym teachers. Now they're fighter pilots, because war doesn't have time for experts. It has time for warm bodies and fuel. They tell you to report to the flight line. You try to act confident, but your heart is racing, and the breakfast you force down, lukewarm powdered eggs, and something that may have once been bread, is now trying to evacuate. Your uniform is scratchy. It always is. The collar's too tight. The pants ride high enough to cause philosophical discomfort. The boots never broke in, they just broke you. But you wear it all anyway, because the plane doesn't care how you feel. Neither does your commanding officer. The walk to the tarmac is long and filled with bad smells. Fuel, oil, wet canvas, someone cooking something over an open barrel that you hope isn't meat. You pass a crew chief smoking a cigarette that looks like it's been relit 3 times. He nods at you without enthusiasm. He's seen enough new pilots to know most of you won't be here long. Not in one piece anyway. Then you see it. Your aircraft. It's beautiful in the same way a chainsaw is beautiful. All power, noise, and potential disaster. The fuselage is covered in grime and fingerprints. The wings are smeared with oil, mud, and yesterday's weather. The propeller looks fine, which is something, and the cockpit glass is only slightly cracked. You try not to look nervous. You climb in. The seat is metal with a pad that's about as soft as a dinner plate. You try to adjust it, but the lever's stuck. Your knees bang against the instrument panel. The cockpit smells like a mixture of canvas, sweat, and something vaguely electrical that probably shouldn't be burning. The control stick is greasy. The dials are twitching slightly, like they're trying to warn you. You run the pre-flight checklist, which you've memorised but still doubt. You flip switches, open valves, and touch buttons you don't fully understand. There's no AI co-pilot here. There's just you, a box of gauges, and an engine that could throw a rod at any moment. The crew chief leans in, gives you a thumbs up, and slaps the fuselage twice. It's supposed to be encouraging, but it feels like someone sealing a coffin. You pull on your flight helmet. The chin strap is frayed and smells like old soup. Your goggles are fogging up. You adjust your oxygen mask, and suddenly you're aware that everything you're about to do is being held together with duct tape, blind faith, and a manual written in 1937. The tower clears you for takeoff. You throttle up. The engine groans like a dying ox, then catches. You start rolling forward, bouncing slightly over the uneven tarmac. The plane vibrates like it's trying to escape itself. The moment the wheels leave the ground, your stomach drops. You're airborne, and completely alone. There's no training for how this feels. No one prepares you for what it's like to be thousands of feet in the air inside a machine designed by committee and built by exhausted factory workers during wartime shortages. The cockpit rattles with every gust. The frame creaks. The wind noise is so loud you can't think straight. You're scanning the horizon for threats, scanning your instruments for malfunctions, and scanning your hands to make sure they haven't started shaking. Again. You're supposed to feel powerful up here. That's the lie they tell in the recruitment posters. But you don't feel powerful. You feel like a bug in a tin can, barely steering a glorified lawnmower through a sky full of people who want you dead. Your radio crackles, but you miss half the message, because the static sounds like frying bacon. You respond with a garbled, "Roger!" and hope no one asks you to repeat anything. You were taught formation flying, but in the air it's different. The wind tosses you around like a leaf. One wrong twitch of the stick, and you're veering too close to the next guy. You try to correct, but now your altitude's off. You adjust again and overcompensate. It's like learning to ice skate while being shot at. If the enemy doesn't get you, your own incompetence might. Back on the ground, you're expected to act like you've got it all together. In the air, it's pure panic in slow motion. Every tick of the fuel gauge feels personal. Every flicker of a warning light could be your last. You're not flying the plane. You're negotiating with it, begging it, making deals with gravity, promising the sky that you'll never complain again if it just lets you land without burst into flames. Eventually, someone calls the mission off. Weather. Fog. Some excuse you don't question. You bank left. Too hard. Correct. Too fast. And finally settle into a descent that feels like falling with extra steps. The runway approaches. You bounce on landing, which is standard for rookies, and hit the brakes with a little too much enthusiasm. The plane jerks, stalls, and finally groans to a stop. You exhale like you've been holding your breath for a week. You climb down, your legs like boiled spaghetti, and someone hands you a clipboard. You sign something without reading it. Another pilot slaps you on the back. You're officially one flight closer to not dying. You've got oil on your jacket, sweat in your eyes, and a growing suspicion that your left ear has stopped working. Welcome to the Air Force. You walk back to your bunk, passing another group of recruits staring at their planes like they're about to confess something. You want to tell them it's terrifying, that the first flight doesn't get easier the second time, that it might never get easier. But you don't say anything. You just keep walking, because there's a debrief in 20 minutes, and probably another mission after that. You peel off your gloves. Your hands are trembling. You tell yourself it's from the cold. You sit on your cot and stare at the tent ceiling. Someone nearby is playing cards. Someone else is asleep with a cigarette burning near their sock. You could die tomorrow and the world would just keep spinning. You're not a hero. You're barely a passenger in a flying hazard that happens to have your name on the side. But there's no quitting, no resigning, no changing departments. The war doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care that your uniform still smells like fear and engine grease. It just keeps moving, and so do you, because someone will knock on your tent wall soon and tell you it's time to go again. And you'll go, because you're a pilot now. The uniform doesn't come first. The screaming does. You don't arrive at flight school and get handed a plane. You get yelled at for standing incorrectly. You get ordered to run laps because your boots aren't laced fast enough. You get introduced to your commanding officer, not with a handshake, but with a 6-minute tirade about your slouch. Training, they call it. But it feels more like being inducted into a cult where the main doctrine is sleep deprivation and humiliation. You thought flight training would involve aircraft. It does eventually. After weeks of lectures, drills, inspections, and something called physical hardening, which is basically push-ups until your spine tries to resign. The barracks are overcrowded, the food is colourless, the mattress is a sack of straw inside a sack of lies. You're constantly surrounded by other men who also don't know what they're doing, but pretend they do, because no one wants to be the weak link. Weak links get noticed. And being noticed is bad. Your days start at 4:30. Not because anything important is happening at that hour, but because someone decided discipline means never being comfortable. The morning routine is a race against the clock. You shave in cold water, spill powder from a paper packet into a cup, and call it coffee, and sprint to formation while fastening buttons that refuse to line up. If you're 30 seconds late, you're running laps. If your bed isn't made tight enough to bounce a coin, you're remaking it while a corporal supervises and makes passive-aggressive remarks about your pillow placement. Every step of training is designed to make you feel stupid. The instructors are experts in sarcasm, and they've seen every version of your confused face 1,000 times. You're never fast enough, never neat enough, never alert enough. Even when you do everything right, they'll invent something wrong just to keep the power imbalance intact. You quickly learn that yes, sir, is always the correct answer, even if you're agreeing to something that sounds physically impossible or morally questionable. Then come the classroom sessions. Hours of black and white slides, grainy diagrams, and instructors with chalkboards and short tempers. You memorise aircraft specs, engine systems, radio procedures, flight physics. You practice Morse code until the dots and dashes blur into a mental buzzsaw. You get tested constantly, but not on what's useful, mostly on whatever obscure trivia they think separates the good pilots from the corpses. You fail a test, you get assigned latrine duty for a week. You pass it, you just get yelled at slightly less. Some days you don't fly at all. Some weeks even. Bad weather, equipment shortages, or just bureaucratic chaos. So you sit around pretending to study, but mostly you're learning how to smoke, gamble, and kill time without getting caught doing nothing. You're always on edge. Every officer, every sergeant, every clipboard is a potential disaster. You learn not to ask questions. You learn that sarcasm, once your defense mechanism, now gets you physical consequences. When you finally get into a trainer aircraft, it's not the polished, gleaming machine from the posters. It's a two-seat, underpowered, overused metal death trap with more duct tape than rivets. Your instructor climbs in with a face like he regrets every life choice that led to this moment. You fumble with your harness, overthink every dial, and pray you don't vomit mid-flight. The moment the engine sputters to life, your nerves do too. The takeoff is jerky. The air feels less like a medium and more like a punishment. The first flight is mostly about proving you can listen to shouted commands while not crashing. You don't feel like you're flying the plane, more like it's dragging you into the sky out of spite. The controls are stiff, and every movement you make is either too much or not enough. The instructor says things like, "You're going to kill us both," with a calm voice that makes it worse. You land somehow, and the first thing you're told is everything you did wrong, in detail, with an uncomfortably long pause after each mistake. There's no praise, not really. If you hear "not bad," it's considered a compliment worthy of framing. Most feedback is corrective, often screamed over the sound of engines or during a surprise inspection at 6 a.m. when someone found a smudge on your boots and decided that meant you don't care about the war effort. You write letters home that leave out most of the details. You say it's tough but rewarding, even though your fingers are blistered from scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush, and your back feels like you're 73. The training gets harder. Simulated combat drills. Tight formation flying. Emergency procedures that you rehearse over and over in the hope you'll remember them when you're plummeting toward the earth with one engine smoking and a co-pilot screaming. You practice bailing out, jumping from a wooden tower into a sandpit that feels like concrete. The parachute drills are performed with gear that's either too heavy, too old, or both. They don't care. You're not supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to survive. Night flights come next. You can't see anything. The cockpit is dark. The instruments glow faintly. And every shape outside looks like a potential mid-air collision. You lose your sense of up and down. You grip the stick until your hand cramps. The instructor says, "You're climbing," but it feels like you're falling. You want to ask how he knows, but you don't want to find out the hard way. When you finally land, you sit in the cockpit a little too long before climbing out. You tell yourself it's because you're savouring the experience, but it's not. It's because your legs won't stop shaking. You lose people. Not always to crashes, though there are those too. Some wash out, some quit, some get reassigned after a nervous breakdown that nobody talks about. One guy just vanished. You hear rumours. Maybe he punched an instructor. Maybe he wandered off base. No one really knows, or cares. There's always another recruit to take his place. The war machine doesn't pause for missing parts. You're tested constantly, in the air, on the ground, during inspections, during meals. They want to see who cracks, who hesitates, who panics when something explodes unexpectedly, which happens more often than you'd think. Fire drills are frequent and never rehearsed. Sometimes they're not even drills. You learn to sleep lightly, boots by your bed, because being unprepared is worse than being exhausted. Eventually they say you're ready, not because you're good, but because you're good enough. Because they need bodies in cockpits. Because someone decided that if you can take off, navigate and land without killing anyone, you're qualified to fly straight into enemy territory. You graduate with a ceremony that feels more like a production line checkpoint. You get a patch, you get new orders, you get a handshake from someone who will forget your name before the ink dries, and just like that, you're a pilot, officially. You stand in line with the others, uniforms pressed, hair trimmed, back straight. You're all pretending this is what you wanted, that this is where you belong, that you're not terrified. No one talks about what happens next. Not yet. You've got new gear to collect, a train to catch, a base to report to, but everyone knows what's coming. The sky, the missions, the enemy. You've spent weeks being broken down and rebuilt into something slightly more durable. But it's not enough. It never is. The yelling stops, but the pressure doesn't. You're not being hazed anymore. Now it's real. The consequences aren't extra drills or missed meals. The consequences are aluminum shrapnel and flames and black smoke spiralling down from 15,000 feet. You lie in bed one last time at training camp, staring at the ceiling of a wooden barracks that smells like old socks and failure. Your duffel is packed. Your orders are folded in your jacket pocket. Outside, someone is coughing. Someone else is laughing too loudly at something that isn't funny. You close your eyes and try not to think about tomorrow. Because next time you climb into a cockpit, it won't be to prove you can fly. It'll be to prove you can survive. It's not even light out yet, but you're awake. Not by choice. You didn't wake up so much as get yanked out of whatever half sleep your body managed to scrape together during the night. Something buzzed past your ear a few minutes ago. Might have been a mosquito. Might have been a flying piece of lint. Doesn't matter. You're up now, lying on a canvas cot in a tent that smells like diesel fumes, wet canvas, and 5 other men trying very hard not to die from boredom or trench foot. You lie still, listening. The quiet before dawn is never really quiet. Somewhere outside, there's the constant low drone of generators, the clatter of someone loading crates into a truck, and the muffled sound of a man coughing like he's about to expel a lung. You think about getting up, but you know what's waiting. Cold air, lukewarm coffee, and whatever new briefing someone's decided to drop on you before breakfast. The best part about sleeping in a canvas tent near the front lines is that you never sleep well, and you're always technically on duty. You don't get a wake-up call. You get a shouted name and 30 seconds to appear semi-functional or risk being put on latrine patrol for the rest of the week. The air is damp. The blanket is too thin to keep you warm and too heavy to fold off without effort. Your breath fogs slightly when you exhale. You haven't felt properly warm since you arrived at this base. The stove in the corner of the tent has been out since midnight and no one refilled it. There's a pile of wood next to it that might be usable, but you've also seen rats in it, so no one touches it anymore. You swing your legs over the side of the cot and feel the immediate regret as your boots hit the cold ground. It's not muddy, not yet, just cold, gritty and sticky with some kind of fuel residue that's probably flammable and definitely permanent. There's no privacy. There never is. The tent is one room, shared by 6 men and an ecosystem of flies, lice and questionably ambitious ants. You've stopped being embarrassed about changing clothes in front of people. Modesty is a luxury no one can afford when you're living in a place where the latrine is a hole in the ground with a plank across it and a canvas sheet pretending to be a wall. You pull on your trousers, still damp from yesterday's rain, and your jacket, which smells like it's been used to mop up an oil spill. Probably because it has. The first thing you do every morning is check the bulletin board outside the tent. That's where the day's orders go. Who's flying? Who's on ground crew? Who's on ration duty? Who's being sent out on the kind of recon mission that might as well come with a blindfold and a cigarette? The walkover is short, but it feels like a mile when your joints are stiff, and your stomach is already protesting the lack of anything edible. You pass another row of tents. Some guys are still sleeping. Others are already up, shaving with dull razors and boiling canteen water over small campfires. You hear a radio crackling from the officer's tent, some reporter back home droning on about progress on the front. It doesn't match what you see out here. The ground is uneven. Tents are half collapsed. Aircraft are lined up haphazardly near the strip, some missing entire panels, some leaking, some clearly being held together by tape and hope. Mechanics are already working. They don't stop. They just rotate out. There's always something broken, leaking, or sparking. One of the planes still has blood on the fuselage. No one's cleaned it yet. No one mentions it. Back at the tent, breakfast appears in the form of a tin mess kit handed through the flap by a guy who looks just as miserable as you. Inside, cold beans, grey toast, and a sausage that looks like it's been recycled from last week. You eat because you have to, not because you want to. The mess tent serves food on a strict schedule and in strict quantities. Complaining gets you nothing. Actually, it gets you less. The last guy who mouthed off got handed raw onions and a can of lard and told to get creative. There's a briefing in 15 minutes. You're not even sure if you're flying today, but you still have to show up. You always have to show up. You could be sick, exhausted, still bleeding from a maintenance accident. Doesn't matter. You sit through the same monotone rundown of weather, enemy positions, fuel shortages, and target confidence levels. There's always a map with pins in it. There's always someone pointing with a stick. And there's always a moment where the room goes quiet as they read the names of the crew who didn't make it back yesterday. Everyone pretends not to react. You keep your face neutral, your eyes forward. If you're lucky, they weren't your friends. If you're not, you bury the feeling and move on, because no one has time to talk about it. There's work to do. There's always work to do. You go through the morning routine like you're in a trance. Fuel check, weapon check, parachute inspection, flight briefing. You talk with your crew, but it's all surface level. Jokes, complaints, weather talk. No one asks how you slept. No one wants to know the answer. Your helmet smells like rubber and despair. You strap it on anyway. The goggles don't fit right, but there's no time to adjust them. Your oxygen mask has a crack near the vent. You hold it a certain way when you wear it so it doesn't leak. It's either that or ask for a new one and get told to file a form that never goes anywhere. Outside, the sun is finally up, but it doesn't help. The sky is grey, the wind cuts through your jacket. The ground feels harder than usual. Maybe it's your nerves. Maybe it's the realisation that this isn't a dream. This is your life now. Waking up in a tent surrounded by men who look 10 years older than they did last week. Eating food that barely qualifies as food. Strapping into planes that might disintegrate mid-air. And pretending it's normal. You used to be someone. A student. A mechanic. A farm kid. Now you're just pilot. Just a number on a manifest. Just another guy they can point to when they need a body in the sky. You think about writing home, but you don't. What would you say? Still here. Still tired. Still trying not to die. Not exactly postcard material. You go through the motions, zip the jacket, adjust the straps, run your hands over the plane like that's going to make it any safer. The mechanics give you a quick nod. They've done their best. The rest is up to luck, skill, and engine mood swings. Someone shouts your name. It's time. You climb up, one boot on the wing, one hand gripping the side of the fuselage. The metal's cold. The cockpit's colder. You slide in, and everything familiar and awful returns. The smell, the cramped space, the stiff controls. You strap in and wait. Above you, the sky is still grey. Inside you, the dread hasn't left. And the mosquitoes? They'll be waiting when you get back. If you get back. The flight's been scrubbed. Fog rolled in heavy over the strip, and someone finally decided to call it before half the unit flew into a mountain they couldn't see. You're grounded, for now, which sounds like a break, until you realise that downtime in a war zone just means you're not dying in the air. You're dying in increments, on the ground, surrounded by bad food and worse thoughts. You walk toward the mess tent, because it's what everyone else is doing. There's no real hunger. Your body runs on stress and habit now. But skipping breakfast isn't an option. If you don't show up when food's being handed out, they assume you're dead, or you'll be reassigned to something worse, like latrine duty during a cholera outbreak, or guarding a fuel depot with one flashlight and a 3-day-old pistol. The mess line is already forming. It's a slow-moving collection of identical, unshaven faces. Most of you haven't bathed properly in a week. Everyone smells like gun oil, foot powder, and cheap soap that doesn't lather. You stand in line holding your tin mess tray, watching steam rise from the mess tent like it's a promise and a threat. Inside, the smell hits you. Warm food, technically, but there's a layer of something else underneath it. A chemical note from cleaning fluids, something burnt, and the unmistakable scent of meat that's been reheated too many times to still be legally considered meat. It's not appetizing, it's just hot, and hot means edible. Probably. You reach the front of the line. The cook doesn't look at you. He's got a cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth, and he's wearing a stained apron that used to be white. He slops something yellow onto your tray, powdered eggs. Not eggs scrambled or fried, just eggs, a dehydrated paste reanimated with hot water and low expectations. They taste like disappointment and chalk. Next, a pale, rectangular slice lands beside the eggs with a wet slap. Spam, again. The same canned compressed brick of meat byproduct you've eaten every other morning since arriving. It jiggles slightly. It's both too firm and too soft. You cut it with your fork, and it resists like it knows what's coming. You chew it anyway. You always chew it. The salt hits first, then something vaguely pork adjacent, followed by a metallic aftertaste that lingers like regret. There's toast too. if you can call it that. It's bread that's been toasted at some point in its life cycle, then left in a warming tray long enough to soak up the collective humidity of the tent. It sags when you lift it. You eat it anyway, because it's better than nothing. And the coffee sure isn't going to fill you up. Speaking of coffee, it's here, but it's not coffee. It's brown, warm, and bitter. And that's where the similarities end. It comes from a powdered mix that includes things coffee shouldn't include. The texture is off. It's gritty in a way that makes you question the water source. But it's caffeinated, allegedly, and that's the only thing anyone cares about. You sit at a long wooden table next to guys who are chewing without enthusiasm. No one talks much. Small talk exists, but it's forced. No one wants to be the one to ask, "How are you?" Because the answer's always alive, and that's as far as it goes. You eat in silence, listening to the dull hum of generators outside, the occasional thud of boots, and the static from a field radio that's always on, but never says anything good. Someone lights a cigarette before finishing their meal. You used to hate that, the way it mixed with the food smell. Now you don't care. You'll probably light one too, just to give your hands something to do besides shake. Smoking here isn't a habit, it's a social agreement. You do it to look busy. You do it because it fills the time between being yelled at and being airborne. You do it because everyone else does, and no one wants to be the guy not coping the same way. After a while, someone cracks a joke. It's not funny, but people laugh. Nervously. Automatically. It's not about the joke. It's about proving you can still laugh. That you haven't gone completely numb. The guy who made the joke doesn't smile. He just stares at his tray, chewing slowly like he's not sure if he's eating food or just surviving it. The officers eat separately. They have their own tent. Their food isn't much better, but they get actual plates and maybe some jam if the supply truck didn't get blown off the road. You're not allowed in there unless you're summoned, and being summoned usually means you've done something very right or very wrong. Neither is good. Sometimes there's mail. Letters from home get passed out during meals. Today, nothing. You haven't gotten a letter in 2 weeks. Could be the mail's slow. Could be the mail truck exploded. Could be no one wrote you. You try not to think about it. A loudspeaker crackles to life, announcing something you can't quite make out. The guy next to you mutters, "That's never good." He's right. The loudspeaker rarely delivers happy news. It's usually a delay, a change, or a casualty list. Sometimes it's just a weather update that ruins your whole schedule. Mostly, it's the war reminding you that it owns your calendar now. You finish your food, if it can be called that. The eggs have congealed into a single solid mass. The spam is gone somehow, though you don't remember actually chewing the last bite. The toast is still uneaten, but you're keeping it. It might come in handy later as a coaster, a weapon, or emergency insulation. Outside, the sky is still heavy, the kind of overcast that settles on your shoulders. You step out into the open air, but there's no freshness to it. It smells like burning rubber and old oil. Someone's running engine tests down near the hangars. Someone else is shouting about a missing wrench. A jeep backfires in the distance, and 3 people instinctively duck. You light that cigarette after all. You don't really want it. You just don't want to stand there doing nothing while your brain fills in the gaps with images from last week's mission. You inhale, exhale, and look down at your boots, caked with dirt that no one can identify anymore. You tell yourself the food's sitting well. It's not. Your stomach's tight. and your hands haven't stopped twitching since before breakfast. Someone tells you the next mission might go out at dusk. They don't say what the target is. You don't ask. If it's yours, you'll find out in the briefing. If it's not, you'll still be listening for names that don't come back. Either way, you'll eat the same meal tomorrow. Powdered eggs, spam, a little more anxiety than the day before, and maybe a cigarette to wash it all down. You've been issued a uniform, technically. You were given one the day you arrived and told to make it last. That wasn't a suggestion. That was policy. There's no wardrobe rotation. There's no winter gear versus summer gear. There's just one standard issue set of government-regulated discomfort that you're expected to wear through all weather, all missions, and all states of personal hygiene. Let's start with the fabric. Wool. Thick, scratchy, barely processed wool. If it's not wool, it's canvas. And if it's not canvas, it's some mystery blend that feels like burlap soaked in disappointment. No matter the material, it does two things extremely well. Trap heat when you don't want it, and soak up cold when you least need it. The second it touches your skin, your body starts negotiating with you. You itch immediately. Not a subtle itch. Not a maybe it's in my head kind of itch. A full body, am I allergic to military service? Type of response. You scratch, but it doesn't help. The wool just fights back harder. Then there's the sizing. Your jacket fits across the shoulders, but cinches at the neck like a medieval punishment device. Your trousers sag in the back, but cut into your thighs like they were designed by someone with a grudge against knees. The boots are either too tight or too loose, never just right. You stuff the toes with old socks. You line the heels with newspaper. It helps for about an hour, until the paper turns into wet pulp, and you're walking on blisters wrapped in mush. The boots deserve their own complaint. They're made of leather, stiff, inflexible, and dyed a shade of brown that hides blood surprisingly well. The soles are thick but flat. No arch support, no cushioning, just a solid platform for marching until your spine decides it's had enough. You don't break them in, they break you in. And if they get wet, which they do often, they shrink into a new shape that's somehow even less compatible with human anatomy. The shirt is cotton maybe, hard to tell anymore. It used to be white, but it now lives somewhere in the grey-brown spectrum of battlefield camouflage via general filth. The collar never lies flat. The buttons pop open at random, usually while you're trying to look official. The sleeves itch at the forearms, and there's always one thread that tickles the inside of your elbow like it's trying to drive you insane slowly. Then there's the flight suit. It's supposed to go over your regular uniform, which means you're layering scratchy on top of stiff, topped with zipper seams that dig into your ribs every time you sit down. The suit isn't insulated, but it traps heat like it is. Unless it's cold out, in which case it becomes a wind tunnel with sleeves. There are pockets everywhere, but none of them are in a place that makes sense. The zipper is stuck half the time, and when you finally get it closed, it locks in your body heat, your sweat, and your regrets. Gloves? Yes, they give you gloves. Thin leather with no insulation, no grip, and a smell that implies multiple previous owners. They're more ceremonial than functional. You wear them because you have to, not because they help. Half the guys just cut the fingertips off so they can actually feel the controls. The other half just deal with it, even when their hands go numb in the cold. you also get a scarf. Not for style, for survival. It's supposed to keep your neck warm and prevent your flight helmet from chafing your skin raw. It doesn't do either. It slides out of place every 5 minutes and ends up wadded under your collar, making you look like a man who lost a fight with a curtain. But you wear it anyway, because the one time you don't, your helmet rubs a red line around your neck, like you tried to hang yourself with wool. The helmet itself is a whole other problem. It's made of thick leather with minimal padding, designed to make you feel like you're doing something important while offering exactly zero protection if you actually hit anything. The chin strap never stays tight. The inside smells like sweat, rubber, and other people's panic. When you add the goggles and the oxygen mask, you're basically blind, deaf, and wheezing inside a leather bag that makes your head itch so badly you consider shaving it just for relief. Every part of the uniform is too much or not enough. Too hot, too cold, too tight, too loose. It's designed to be durable, not comfortable, which means it will survive things you won't. Fire? The wool will char. Cold? It will absorb your body heat like a sponge and never give it back. Rain? Everything you're wearing will soak it up, hold it close, and stay damp for days. And then you sweat, constantly. From the marching, the drills, the nerves, the cockpit heat, the fear. The uniform absorbs it all. You can't wash it properly. There are no laundry facilities. If you're lucky, you rinse it in a barrel, slap it against a rock, and hope the sun is out long enough to dry it. Most of the time, you just wear it wet and tell yourself it's fine. It's not. Your skin protests in the form of rashes, sores, and mystery itches that don't go away. Your underwear situation is equally bleak. 2 pairs, maybe, if your supply sergeant is generous. No elastic, no breathable fabrics, just cotton with seams in all the wrong places. You rotate them like you're managing a wartime logistics schedule. If one pair dries, you wear it. If not, you improvise. Hygiene isn't about being clean. It's about being just clean enough not to get medically pulled. You remember what it was like to wear real clothes. Civilian clothes. Soft fabric, clean socks, shirts that fit without leaving red marks on your shoulders. Those memories feel like postcards from another life. Now, you wear the same outfit every day, and every night you peel it off like a second skin made of sandpaper and regret. And yet, no matter how bad it gets, you keep putting it on. Because the uniform isn't just clothing, it's armour. Not the kind that stops bullets, but the kind that hides how tired you are. It tells people you're still functional, still part of the system, still showing up. Even when you'd rather crawl back into your cot and never get out again. You look around and see the others wearing the same thing. All of you scratched raw, sweat-soaked, patched and fraying at the cuffs. No one complains. Not out loud. Complaining gets you nothing but an extra chore and a reputation for being soft, so you tighten the belt one more notch, tug the sleeves down, and act like everything fits. Because you've got orders, you've got a job. And itchy or not, this uniform goes wherever you do, into the sky, into the storm, into whatever hell's coming next. The thing about World War II aircraft is that they look a lot more impressive in posters than they do up close. On paper, they're machines of power, speed, innovation. Up in the sky, they're roaring symbols of engineering dominance. On the ground, they're oil-leaking, rivet-rattling bundles of stress, designed by committees and built in a rush by people trying to hit quotas. You don't fly a machine like this. You cling to it and hope it doesn't kill you before the enemy gets a chance. You walk up to your plane, and from 10 feet away, it's already complaining. One of the ground crew is cursing under his breath while tightening a panel that keeps popping loose. Someone else is draining excess fuel from the tanks, and the smell hits you before the breeze does. The aircraft squats on its landing gear like it's tired of being a plane. It's lopsided. One wheel's inflated more than the other, and the nose has a new dent no one will explain. The paint's chipped. The fuselage is streaked with soot. The engine cowling is held closed with more wire than you'd like. They call it the bird. You never named it. Someone else did. It's always got a name. Something ironic, like Lucky Lady or No Worries. Sometimes something cruel, like Widowmaker or Last Chance. You don't laugh at the names. Not anymore. Naming it gives it personality. Personality gives it power. And this thing already has enough of that. The wings are long, thin, and slightly bowed like they're exhausted. You tap them with the back of your hand as you do your walk around. Not because that helps, but because you've seen other pilots do it, and you're willing to try anything that feels remotely like control. You check the ailerons. They move, kind of. You glance at the propeller. It spins fine when idle, but last week it threw a blade mid-run-up. No one was hurt, that time. Under the plane, you duck and inspect the landing gear. It creaks just sitting there. The tyres are bald. Not worn, bald. The tail wheel might actually be from a different model entirely. You ask the crew chief about it. He shrugs and says, "It fits, doesn't it?" You don't push it. You don't have time. You never do. The cockpit is your next stop. Climbing in is a performance. 1 foot on the wing root, 1 hand on the open canopy, a slight shift of weight, and then a slide into the seat that never feels graceful. You sit down and feel every ridge of the frame press into your spine. The seat doesn't adjust. The rudder pedals are too far if you slouch, too close if you straighten. You compromise by being uncomfortable. Inside the cockpit, it's a museum of knobs, switches, dials and levers, none of which are labelled in a way that would help a normal human. You've memorised what each one does because you have to. One wrong toggle and you're dumping fuel instead of raising the gear. The instrument shakes slightly when the plane's at rest. When it's moving, they rattle like they're trying to detach themselves and flee the scene. The control stick is greasy. Always. Even after a cleaning. You don't know if it's oil, sweat, or the collective residue of fear from every pilot who's gripped it before you. You wear gloves, but it seeps through. You rest your hand on it and feel the plane's attitude, literally and emotionally. It's never neutral. It's always slightly pissed off. Then there's the engine. A radial monster bolted to the nose, big enough to power a tank and loud enough to make sure no one ever forgets it's there. Starting it is a ceremony. Fuel on, mixture rich, magnetos live, prime it. Then you hit the starter and pray. It coughs, backfires, belches smoke, and finally catches with a growl that drowns out every second thought you were having. The whole plane vibrates like it's angry to be awake. You check the gauges again. Oil pressure rising, manifold pressure good, RPM in the green. That's what it says anyway. The Needles aren't known for their honesty. You learn to read the engine by feel. If something sounds off, it probably is. And if it doesn't sound off, it still might be. The propeller is a blur now. The ground crew gives you thumbs up, but they're already stepping back. No one lingers near a spinning engine. They've seen what happens. The plane wants to move. Even with the brakes locked, It lurches forward like a dog on a leash. You taxi slowly, the wheels grinding over gravel and tarmac that's been patched more times than the aircraft. The brakes are touchy. Too much, and you'll nose over. Too little, and you'll coast into someone's tail. You pump the rudder pedals to stay straight. Every bump feels like a question. By the time you reach the runway, you're sweating. Not from the heat, from the concentration, from the knowledge that everything from this point on could be the last time you do any of it. The aircraft is lined up. The throttle is pushed forward, slowly at first, then all the way. The engine roars. The whole frame shudders like it's going to rip itself apart. You hold the stick back gently until the tail lifts, then forward until you feel that moment, that very brief, very unnatural moment where the wheels leave the earth. You're airborne again, still not used to it. Climbing is noisy, the wind noise builds, the airframe groans, the engine howls in protest. You raise the gear, or try to. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the left one gets stuck. Sometimes both come up, but the indicator says they didn't. Sometimes you just accept that you'll deal with it later and keep flying with one foot imagining the worst. The plane is fast. Not fast enough to outrun enemy fire, but fast enough to make you believe you might. Manoeuvring feels like arguing with a tired ox. You can force it, but it takes work, and there's no guarantee it will cooperate. Turns are wide, rolls are slow. You feel every G in your spine, every vibration in your teeth. It's not fluid. It's not graceful. It's like flying a tractor that thinks it's a fighter. And yet, somehow, this machine still flies. Despite the bolts that never stop rattling, the fuel lines that hiss when they shouldn't, and the instruments that seem to play little games with your sense of stability, it stays in the air. Not out of loyalty, not because it likes you, but because physics hasn't given up yet. You level out and check the horizon. It's quiet for now. Just you, the sky, and the deep, constant groan of a machine that was never designed to last this long. You glance at the gauges again. Fuel, fine. Oil pressure, twitching. Temperature, climbing faster than you'd like. You make a note to monitor it. Not that there's anything you can do if it spikes. If it goes, it goes. You'll know when it does, because the engine will stop being loud and start being very, very quiet. You remember when you first saw this aircraft in a photo? Clean lines, sharp angles, gleaming metal under blue skies. Now you sit in a chattering, leaking patchwork death trap that shudders when you bank too hard, and has a suspicious tendency to lose altitude when it shouldn't. You're flying a machine built on urgency, patched by necessity, and held together by mechanics who work around the clock, and don't have half the parts they need. There's no warranty, no backup, just hope, duct tape, and your own refusal to panic when something starts smoking mid-flight. And this is the best part of your day. You're summoned before sunrise. That's how it always starts. Not with fanfare or ceremony, just a knock on the tent pole and someone saying your name like they're asking for volunteers to clean up a toxic spill. You drag yourself out of your cot, half-dressed, eyes gummy with sleep, and immediately wish you weren't conscious. Outside, the air's still cold enough to hurt. Fog clings to the ground, like it's trying to hide the airfield from the pilots who are about to take off from it. You already know what that means. Visibility's garbage, turbulence will be worse, and no one will postpone anything. The pre-flight briefing is in a large tent, or, if you're lucky, a wooden shack with enough room for a folding table. a map, and 24 chairs that all wobble. You find your seat next to guys who smell like cigarettes, fear, and whatever was for dinner 3 nights ago. Everyone looks half dead. No one makes eye contact. There's a hush, like a funeral service without the closure. At the front, there's a chalkboard covered in abbreviations. Flight paths, call signs, radio frequencies, code names for targets that don't sound like places, but sound exactly like things people don't come back from. A captain stands by with a pointer, and you can tell by the bags under his eyes that even he doesn't want to do this. He starts with the weather, which is always bad. The words scattered cloud, light icing, and moderate turbulence are military code for hope your oxygen system holds and maybe write a quick letter first. Wind speed at altitude, brutal. Visibility depends how much you enjoy flying blind. Icing risk, almost definitely. They say it's manageable, but then again, so was last week, and you're still scraping frostbite off your fingertips. Then it's the route. They draw a line on the map. Straight out, long loop, drop your payload, and back. Simple, like connect the dots. Except each dot is filled with anti-aircraft fire, enemy patrols, and a growing suspicion that someone in intelligence doesn't know how to read elevation charts. The target is always strategic. A bridge, a depot, a convoy. Something that sounds important enough to justify the fact you'll be flying through a gauntlet to reach it. Next up, enemy activity. Reports suggest light resistance. They always suggest that, and they're always wrong. You've been through light resistance missions that ended in flak storms so dense you could walk across the sky on them. German fighters? Maybe. Maybe not. That's the official line. What that actually means is, we have no idea. Good luck. Then come the formation assignments. Who's flying where? Who's leading? Who's tail end Charlie? The last guy in the group. A spot famous for getting picked off like a slow antelope. You watch the assignments appear on the chalkboard and hope your name doesn't end up at the bottom of any column. Because bottom means vulnerable. Bottom means exposed. Bottom means you're bait. Call signs are assigned next. Yours is a nonsense word you won't remember until someone shouts it into your headset at 15,000 feet. You scribble it down anyway, along with a radio channel number that may or may not work. Last week, your channel was dead for 80% of the mission. You had to fly home blind and follow a smoke column just to find the airstrip. The guy giving the briefing doesn't bother dressing it up. He knows what you're flying into. He doesn't sugarcoat the risk, but he doesn't dwell on it either. He uses phrases like expected losses and acceptable margin like they're budget items. And maybe they are. Maybe that's how they survive, the guys who send you out. Turn casualties into math. Convert fear into percentages. There's always a moment in every briefing where the room goes quiet. It's never planned. It just happens. Usually after the target is named, or after they mention who didn't come back from the last mission. You feel it. A small tightening in your chest. A flicker of something you don't have time to process. You stare at the map and pretend to study it, but you already know it won't matter. Once you're in the air, you'll forget half of what's been said and spend most of your time just trying to stay upright. Someone asks a question, not a stupid one, but it gets a dismissive answer. There's no time for details. If you need more information, you'll get it from the guy next to you, mid-flight, through static and engine noise, or you won't get it at all. The briefing wraps up with the usual pep talk, delivered in the tone of a man who stopped believing in pep a long time ago. It's short. Be sharp. Watch your wingmen. Check your 6. Hit the target. Come home. The kind of speech that could be printed on a card and handed out with your dog tags. The mission clock starts now. You have 90 minutes until takeoff. Enough time to double check your gear, grab another miserable meal, and start regretting every life decision that led to this tent. You stand up with the others. The chairs scrape. Nobody says much. Some nod. Some don't bother. You exit the tent into the dim grey light of morning that looks exactly like the dim grey light of every morning since you got here. The engines are already warming up. The flight line is a hive of activity. Fuel trucks, crew chiefs, mechanics moving with quiet urgency like they're defusing bombs. Because they are. You head back to your tent to suit up. No one walks quickly. There's no rush. Not because you're not on a schedule, you are, but because moving faster won't make the mission come sooner or the nerves go away. Inside your tent, the others are already getting dressed. Flight suits, helmets, gloves, oxygen masks. Everything smells like oil, leather, and a little bit of fear. You go through the motions like you're assembling armour, which, in a way, you are. Not armour to stop bullets. You won't get that. Armour to pretend you're ready. To fake it long enough to climb in, take off, and do it all again. Your crew checks in. Everyone's here. No one says anything meaningful. Just variations of, "You good?" and "See you up there." You check your sidearm, even though if it ever comes down to needing it, the situation's already past fixing. You sling your parachute harness over your shoulder and step outside. The wind hit you. Cold, sharp. The kind of wind that makes your eyes water and your brain start running through every possibility, every malfunction, every burst of flack you might fly into. You try to push it out, but it never really goes away. It just recedes enough for you to keep walking. Your plane is waiting. You're cleared to start engines in 30 minutes. The worst part is, this briefing wasn't even the bad one. This was routine, the calm before the real chaos. Just another day, another target, another forecast of incoming fire and outgoing luck. And you're about to take your seat in the middle of it. There's no graceful way to board a warplane. You don't stroll up and step in like it's a city bus. You climb, you duck, you contort. You shove your gear into a space that's already full, then wedge yourself into a seat that clearly wasn't designed with humans in mind. Getting into the cockpit is a process of eliminating hope one joint at a time. First, the ladder. If you're lucky enough to be flying something with one. Most of the time, it's just a wheel strut, and whatever handholds you can find that aren't covered in grease or about to snap off. Your flight suit bunches up under your armpits. Your parachute pack smacks against your thighs. You lose circulation in one leg before you even get seated. Once you're in, you realise, again, that this cockpit was not designed by anyone who ever intended to sit in it for longer than 10 minutes. You've got about 18 inches of space to exist in, total. If you're tall, you're hosed. If you're short, the seat's too high and the pedals are too far. If you're average, congratulations. Everything is still wrong. Legroom? A fantasy. Your knees are pressed up against the control panel. One wrong shift and your kneecap flips a switch labelled something ominous like fuel cut-off or engine fire override. There's no padding, no ergonomics. The seat is metal with a square of what they call a cushion, but really it's a slab of old canvas stuffed with shredded regret. You'd be more comfortable sitting on a toolbox. Actually, some guys do. There's no lumbar support. There's barely back support. You sit at an angle that suggests the designer's primary concern was minimising pilot survival time. After about 15 minutes in the air, your spine will start filing formal complaints. After an hour, it gives up and just goes numb. The instrument panel is a puzzle board of dials, switches, and gauges arranged with no regard for logic or convenience. Want to check your oil temperature? That's buried behind the radio and half blocked by your throttle arm. Need to adjust the altimeter? Hope you enjoy jamming your wrist into a bolt head and slicing it open while you reach around the yoke. Everything's packed tight because this is a machine of war, not a lounge chair. And safety, that's just a suggestion. The seat harness digs into your chest like it's trying to remind you of every mistake you've ever made. The shoulder straps are too short, the lap belt too loose, and no one knows what happened to the extra buckles. The parachute, if you even have one that fits, is strapped to your back in such a way that if you ever do need to use it, your biggest problem will be trying to reach it while panicking. There's no insulation. The cockpit is either freezing or roasting, depending on the altitude and how many holes the airframe picked up during the last mission. There's no heat, no airflow. The only breeze you get is from a draft near the canopy that sounds like a dying kettle and lets in just enough outside air to make your teeth hurt. Everything is loud, not just loud, assaultive. The engine's directly in front of you, roaring at full throttle with the subtlety of a thunderstorm in a drum factory. Your headset filters some of it out, but not enough. You'll go partially deaf before your tour is over, and everyone knows it. Most of the guys already lip-read more than they listen. The vibration is constant, not gentle, not soothing, aggressive. The whole airframe shakes like it's about to fall apart, and sometimes it does. The throttle buzzes under your hand. The pedals pulse under your boots. The stick wobbles, flexes, and occasionally jolts just to remind you who's really in charge. And then there's the smell. Oil, gasoline, sweat, burnt rubber, leather that's never been cleaned. The musty stink of your own gear after 4 straight missions in the same flight suit. It's a stale cocktail of panic and petroleum, and it hits you the second you seal the canopy. If you're in a bomber, it's somehow worse. You're not even in the cockpit. You're crouched in a metal tube with 4 other guys, each assigned to a position that sounds impressive, but really just means try not to freeze to death while handling weapons near your friends' heads. No seats, just benches or crates. You rotate sitting and standing in shifts. Not for comfort, but because everyone's body eventually gives out from squatting in a tin box for 6 hours. Movement is a joke. If you want to shift positions, you need to unplug from your oxygen line, duck under wires, crawl past the bomb bay doors, and avoid stepping on your crew's faces. One bump of turbulence, and someone gets a boot to the jaw. You can't stand. You can't stretch. You can barely scratch your leg without triggering a full body chain reaction of curses and clattering gear. You think about the planes back home, the ones in air shows and museums. Polished, quiet, spacious, clean. These aren't those planes. This one is a patchwork of repairs, dents and smells. And it doesn't care that you're uncomfortable. It's here to fly, barely, and maybe make it back. That's it. You lean back, a 1/4 inch as far as the seat lets you, and try to breathe normally. But the oxygen system wheezes like an asthmatic accordion, and you're suddenly aware that if anything goes wrong up here, Your comfort level is the absolute last thing anyone's going to worry about. Your body aches already. You haven't even taken off. And it's only going to get worse. You're sitting in the cockpit now. The pre-flight checks complete, the engine noise steady, and the canopy sealed. The mission hasn't started yet. Not technically. But you can feel it pulsing underneath everything. It's not nerves. Not just that. It's the knowledge that for the next few hours you're locked inside a flying oven full of flammable fuel, old wiring, and people pretending they're not terrified. The air inside the plane is thick. Not warm, not cold. Just wrong. It clings to your face under the oxygen mask, fills your nose with a blend of chemical residue and bad decisions. You can't describe it to someone who hasn't been here. It's not one smell. It's dozens, layered and baked into the metal over hundreds of missions. It's old oil soaked into the instrument panel. It's grease smeared on every reachable surface. It's sweat from every pilot who sat here before you and didn't come back. You try not to breathe too deeply, not because it's dangerous, but because the air tastes like something died and then decided to stick around. It's stale, metallic, burnt. There's a sourness to it, like old rations reheated one too many times. Someone vomited in this plane last week, and you're not entirely convinced the smell ever left. Maybe it just changed shape. You can smell fear too. Not in a poetic way, literally. It has a scent, acrid, sharp. It's in the sweat soaked into your gloves. In the damp collar of your flight suit. In the helmet that someone else wore before you. It builds up on long flights when no one speaks, when the engines get too quiet or too loud, when your eyes are locked on the horizon, waiting for tracers to show up like fireflies that kill. Then there's the food, or what's left of it. Someone brought rations on the last flight. Canned meat, hardtack, whatever passed for lunch in a war zone. Half of it spilled. Maybe during a jolt of turbulence. Maybe during evasive manoeuvres. Doesn't matter. What matters is that now it's part of the aircraft's atmosphere. You can't see it, but you can smell it. A low, lingering stench of processed meat, old gravy, and something that might have been a potato. There's a stain near your left foot. You're not sure if it's food or oil. Either way, it's sticky. The air system isn't helping. The small vents meant to circulate air just push it around in lazy circles. You reach up and try to redirect one, but all it does is blow the same foul-smelling gust across your face, like a fan in a locker room that's never been cleaned. You give up. There's no fresh air in here. There never is. In bombers, it's worse. You're trapped in a metal tube with a half-dozen other men, each wearing gear that hasn't been washed in weeks. Breathing through masks that smell like a dentist's office soaked in axle grease. Someone's always chewing gum to keep their ears from popping. Someone else is eating a ration bar that smells like pencil shavings and peanut dust. It floats through the air, joins the cocktail of odours, and lingers longer than it should. You learn not to notice it after a while. Your brain adjusts. You shift focus. But then someone lets out a nervous cough, or shift in their seat and unearths a new scent, and it's all back. One guy once brought hard-boiled eggs on board. The rest of the crew nearly threw him out at 10,000 feet. You joke about it now, but only because humour is cheaper than a breakdown. Your mask is supposed to help. It doesn't. The oxygen doesn't smell clean. It smells dry, like air stored in a basement. It dries your mouth out within minutes, makes your lips crack. Your breath fogs the edges of your goggles. And when you clear it with a glove, the scent of your own sweat is trapped inside. You live in it now. It's your climate. Your personal biome of fear, oil, and the ghost of canned meatloaf. You think about air back home. Clean, grassy air. Ocean breeze. City streets after a thunderstorm. Even the smell of gasoline at a filling station. You'd trade for that in a heartbeat. But here, in the cockpit, there's only one flavour of atmosphere. Survival grade, recycled panic. There's also the smell of heat. You didn't know heat had a smell until now. It does. Electrical heat, engine heat. The inside of the cockpit bakes under sunlight, and all those metal surfaces radiate warmth like the inside of a broken toaster. Your knees start to sweat. Your armpits are soaked. Your gloves get clammy, and the mask over your face feels tighter with every breath. You peel it off for a second and immediately regret it. The rush of stale air makes you gag. You snap it back on and try to forget what you just tasted. And yet, somehow, the worst smell is silent. When everything goes quiet, when the crew stops talking, when the engine hits that certain tone, the stink becomes louder. It fills the void. It becomes all you can think about. It reminds you that you're not in a state-of-the-art machine built for comfort. You're in a flying dumpster filled with aging machinery, combustible fluids, and 6 other guys holding in their fear like it's a bodily function. You notice things in those moments. The whiff of hydraulic fluid leaking under the seat. The trace of gun oil near the trigger on the turret. The faint hint of something burnt that no one else has acknowledged yet. You don't mention it. You never do. Because once you point it out, it's real. And if it's real, it might be serious. And if it's serious, it means you're riding a barely functional tin can into open sky with an engine that smells like a ticking time bomb. Someone else must have noticed. You glance over. The guy on the gun is sniffing, subtly, like he's trying to decide whether it's the ammo belt or his own jacket that smells like hot glue and battery acid. The navigator pulls his scarf tighter, mumbles something, then opens a tiny vent above his station. It lets in a breeze that makes the whole compartment feel like it dropped 10 degrees, but the stink just clings harder, like it's offended by the attempt to escape it. You eat mints. You chew gum. You rub a little menthol on the inside of your collar, but it mixes with everything else and turns into a whole new brand of awful. Your sense of smell becomes a battleground, and you're losing. You stop trying. You get used to it. You must. Because you don't get a break from it. Not mid-air. Not when you land. Not when you peel off your gear and stagger back to your tent. The smells follow you. They've soaked into your skin, your hair, your clothes. You smell like the cockpit now. People notice. The ground crew leans away when you walk past. The cooks wince when you line up for dinner. Your tent mate stops asking what you've been flying because he can already tell. You scrub yourself raw with cold water and harsh soap. It helps for a minute. Then you climb into your bunk, and your blanket still smells like engine fumes and rubberized canvas. You roll over and press your face into the pillow, and it smells like the oxygen mask. You dream of oil, of static, of air that tastes like aluminum. And in the morning it starts again. You wake up, zip up the same sweat-stained flight suit, and breathe it all back in. Because out here, you don't get fresh air. You get recycled history, steeped in grease, fear, and a sandwich that no one remembers bringing. You put it on because you're told to. Because everyone else is wearing one. Because it's part of the checklist. But there's no real confidence behind it. Just habit, regulation, and the kind of blind faith that comes from knowing the alternative is worse. It's called a flak jacket, but it's not the sleek body armour you've seen in movies or training posters. It's more like a heavy quilt someone filled with broken car parts and then dared you to wear during a fistfight with gravity. First thing you notice is the weight. 40 pounds, give or take. It doesn't sound like much until you're wearing it over your flight suit, under your harness, while ducking through narrow passages inside an aircraft, vibrating at high speed. The jacket pulls at your shoulders. It pinches your neck. The longer you wear it, the smaller you feel inside it, like you're being slowly compressed into the shape of a very tired bullet sponge. The material is canvas, thick, stiff, unforgiving. The kind of fabric that absorbs sweat immediately and then refuses to let it go. You put it on dry. You take it off soaked. The inside is lined with padding that isn't soft. It's just more layers of dense, scratchy misery pressed directly against your spine. There's no ventilation, no airflow, just you, wrapped in your own damp regret. It smells like copper and desperation. Every time you adjust it, you get a whiff of the iron dust that never quite washes out. The armoured plates inside, if you're lucky enough to get a newer model, are curved metal inserts that dig into your ribs when you sit. If you got the older version, congratulations. It's filled with hundreds of small metal fragments sewn into the lining like industrial sand. The logic being, maybe if there's enough junk in the way, some of it will catch a piece of incoming flak before it finds your lungs. Does it work? Sometimes. Maybe. Enough to convince people it's worth the effort. But you've seen jackets pulled off after a mission, soaked in blood, torn open like paper bags. You've heard the stories. Guy gets hit, jacket stops the big chunk, but sends 50 tiny bits of shrapnel bouncing around inside. It's like being shot and then bludgeoned by your own protection. You put it on anyway, because something is better than nothing. And because the guy who decided not to wear his last week came home zipped in a canvas bag, it doesn't make you feel safe. Nothing does. It makes you feel heavy. Slower, clumsier. Your movements are stiff. You can't twist fast enough to check your six. You can't reach over your shoulder without lifting the whole slab of armour like it's a reluctant backpack. Try sprinting in it across the tarmac to your aircraft when the alarm goes off. You'll be sweating through your undershirt before you even start the engine. Inside the cockpit, it's worse. The seat was already too small. Now it's impossible. The jacket pushes you forward, scrunches your shoulders, limits how far you can lean. You lose feeling in your thighs from the pressure on your hips. Every turn, every lean toward the instrument panel feels like a test. You don't get to shift positions to stay comfortable. You shift because you're trying not to go numb. If you're in a bomber, it's a little roomier, at least in theory. But you're still ducking through narrow corridors, crawling under beams, rotating through gunner positions that weren't built with full body armour in mind. You bash the jacket against every bulkhead, every hatch, every sharp corner. It catches on knobs, it knocks over gear. One guy ripped his oxygen line out last week trying to turn too fast. Spent 2 minutes choking before someone noticed. Got lucky. You start sweating early. The jacket traps heat like a bad secret. You feel it build across your back, pooling under the straps, rolling down your spine in slow, sticky waves. Your gloves soak through. Your shirt clings. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself it's worth it. You say anything to keep from ripping the thing off mid-flight and chucking it out the hatch. But you keep it on. Because flak is no joke. When it hits, it doesn't tap politely. It shreds. It rips through metal like paper. Tears through skin like cloth. You've seen it. You've felt the plane lurch as a burst detonated too close. You've heard the ping of fragments bouncing off the fuselage, the dull thump of one hitting the tail, the sudden silence when someone's mic goes dead. The jacket won't save you from a direct hit, but maybe, just maybe, it'll stop the piece headed for your heart. Every guy has his own way of dealing with it. Some wear it religiously. Some strip it off the second the wheels leave the ground and sit on it instead, hoping it'll protect their spine in a crash. Others fold it up and use it as a footrest, muttering something about comfort kills. The rulebook says wear it, but once you're in the air, rules start to bend. Especially when survival feels more like chance than protocol. Some guys modify theirs. Cut slits in the sides to move better. Add padding under the shoulders. Replace lost metal tiles with bits of scrap they find lying around. You're not supposed to. But no one stops you. Because command knows this gear wasn't built for comfort, and it wasn't built for you. It was built in a rush for a war moving too fast, designed by people who weren't the ones being shot at. You start to hate the jacket quietly. You hate the smell, the weight, the way it reminds you, constantly, that you're fragile. That someone thought you needed armour because you're being flung through the sky inside a bomb magnet. That they didn't have time to make it better. So this will have to do. And somehow it does. When the mission ends, you peel it off slowly. Everything aches. You set it down like it's made of glass, even though it's clearly made of iron and contempt. You sit still for a minute, spine decompressing, arms tingling, sweat drying on your neck, like a reminder you're still alive. You stretch and feel the weight still pressing on you, even though the jacket's on the floor. You don't complain. Not really. You crack jokes. You call it your sweaty shield, your portable coffin, your extra burden. You hang it up with care, because you'll need it again tomorrow. You always need it again tomorrow. Because flak doesn't care that your back hurts. And the sky never stops shooting. You don't want to end up in a dogfight. No one with a functioning survival instinct wants that. People talk about them like they're some kind of ballet. Two pilots locked in an elegant, high-speed duel, looping and diving like knights of the sky. That's fiction. Dogfights aren't graceful. They're chaotic, fast, terrifying and messy. They don't feel like a duel. They feel like being hunted. And unless you're in the faster, higher flying plane, which, spoiler, you're probably not, you're the one being hunted. It starts with a glint. That's all. Just a flash of light on metal. And suddenly your heart forgets how to beat properly. You squint. You lean forward. Your hands go tight on the stick. Your stomach drops. Another glint. Then another. They're not birds. They're not friendly. You know before the call comes over the radio. And then someone yells it. Bandits. Usually followed by a direction you can't pass, because everyone's shouting at once. You scan the sky, frantically. 10 o'clock high? Where? Is that a contrail? Are they already diving? You spot them. 3, 4, maybe more. Small silhouettes against the sky, moving fast, and you can already feel your mouth go dry. They're higher than you. They always are. Altitude is everything in a dogfight, and they've got it. You're about to be on the menu. They come in fast, like insects with cannons. You never hear them right away. It's the bullets that introduce them. Tracers slice across your field of view. The first burst misses, the second doesn't. Something thunks hard against your fuselage. No explosion, yet just the horrible realization that you're not invincible, not even close. You jerk the stick hard, too hard. The whole plane groans in protest. You roll into a dive, pulling G's that press your brain into the back of your skull. The cockpit tightens around you. The stick shakes in your hands. You can't see them anymore. You don't know if you lost them, or if they're lining up another shot. You bank, climb, drop, roll. There's no strategy. Not now. Just instinct and fear. You were trained to maintain advantage, but no one tells you what to do when the advantage was never yours. The sky is spinning. You see the ground, then clouds, then the sun, then back to the ground. It's a blur of horizon lines and the sound of your own breathing amplified by the mask pressed too tightly against your face. The G-force pulls at your body like it's trying to rip your soul out through your boots. Your arms go numb. Your legs feel like sandbags. You can't turn your head fast enough. Every time you glance over your shoulder, the delay costs you seconds. And seconds, up here, are bullets. You spot one. He's behind you now, riding your tail like he owns it. You make a hard turn. He follows. Another turn. Still there. You dive, pull out, dive again. He sticks. You can't shake him. You can't outturn him. He's lighter, faster and hungrier. You try a trick they taught you. Scissors, jinks, snap rolls. But he's too good. Or maybe you're too tired. Or both. Someone screaming over the radio. You think it's for you. You can't respond. You're too busy not dying. Another burst. This one's closer. You hear it. A rattling, tearing noise. You don't look. You don't have time. The control stick pulls left. You fight it. Maybe it's a fuel line hit. Maybe a control surface. Doesn't matter. You level off, barely, and dive again. Then a miracle. Another friendly cuts in. You catch it out of the corner of your eye. Another shape diving fast, guns flashing. Your pursuer breaks off. You don't question it. You don't even thank them. You just breathe. Or try to. Your lungs don't want to cooperate. Your chest is too tight. You realise you've been holding your breath since the first tracer round past your nose. You're still in the sky, but you're not safe. Not even close. More enemy aircraft are circling. Every second is a roll of the dice. You scan constantly now. Above, below, behind. Your neck aches. Your eyes sting. Your jaw is locked so tight you'll feel it for hours. You catch another one behind a cloud. He's climbing, slow. You dive on him. For a second, you forget everything. The fear, the noise, the aching arms. You just fly. You line up the shot. Your thumb hovers over the trigger. He breaks right. You follow. You fire. Nothing hits. He rolls, dives, disappears. Gone. Your hands are shaking. You're sweating inside your gloves. Your mask is damp. Your goggles are fogging again. You blink hard and shake your head, trying to stay clear. You're not even sure which direction home is anymore. You rely on the compass. You don't trust it, but it's all you've got. More radio chatter. Some of it's panicked. Some of it's just noise. You hear one call sign, then nothing. Just silence. No confirmation. No mayday. No goodbye. Another burst. Not at you this time. You spot the source. Two planes spiralling in the distance. One trailing smoke. You can't tell who's who. You don't want to. You turn away. You have to. Eventually it ends. Not because it's over. Because someone calls it. Or because there's no more gas. Or because the targets are hit and the rest of the squad's just trying to get out alive. You form up, the survivors, the shaken. You fly home in a loose trail, no one in tight formation anymore. No one pretending this was a clean run. The landing is rough. You bounce once, twice, skid, your tyres hold, you slow to a crawl, you taxi in silence, you shut down the engine. The noise dies, and it's worse than the battle. The silence is too loud. You climb out of the cockpit on legs that barely work. Someone asks if you're okay. You nod. You lie. You make a joke that doesn't land. You walk back toward the tent. Someone else is crying. Quietly. You pretend not to notice. You don't want to know who didn't make it. Not yet. Dogfights are not games, not heroics. They're panic in 3 dimensions. They're a test you never studied for. You don't win a dogfight, you just survive one. Or you don't. And the sky doesn't care either way. You knew it was coming. Everyone knows. It's not an if, it's a when. The guns on the ground don't need to find you. They just need to shoot in your general direction and wait. You're flying through a sky full of guesses, and one of them is going to be right. So when the flack starts popping off around your plane, it's not a surprise. It's just the moment where your brain decides to scream into a corner of your skull and let your body handle the next few minutes. You spot the first black puff ahead, distant, almost harmless looking, like someone's lighting smoke signals from below. And then another, and another. It's not random. It's a wall, an invisible curtain of metal and fire and pure bad luck that you're going to fly straight through because that's what the mission says. There's no dodging it. There's no going around. The formation stays tight, the altitude locked in. You just grit your teeth and hope your number's not written on the next shell. And then it hits. Not directly, not yet, just the shock wave. A blast close enough to rattle the wings, to throw your instruments a little off kilter, to punch your heart up into your throat. You grab the stick harder, not because it helps, but because letting go feels worse. The cockpit fills with sound, metallic pinging as shrapnel dances off the fuselage, a low thunk from somewhere near the tail, a sharper crack behind your head that might have been a hit or just your nerves. Your co-pilot shouts something you don't catch. You shout back. Neither of you hears anything. You just keep flying. And the plane groans like it's alive and unhappy. You feel the controls tighten, then loosen. Something's different, but you don't know what yet. You glance down at the gauges. One's dropped. Oil pressure. Just a little. Maybe it will hold. Maybe it's already leaking out behind you in a trail you can't see. Another burst. Closer this time. The sky flashes white, then black, then back to blue. Your goggles go dark with soot, and your ears ring like someone dropped a church bell into your helmet. You're still flying. Somehow. You think about the armour on the plane. Such as it is. Thin plating in a few places. The rest is just aluminum. Lightweight, fast, very, very easy to shred. Because that's the thing no one tells you in the recruitment posters. These aircraft aren't tanks. They're tin cans with wings, designed to carry bombs, bullets, or fuel, not to survive hits. If flak catches you wrong, it'll punch a hole through the fuselage like paper. Doesn't matter how fast you're going. Doesn't matter how good you are. A direct hit and you're just vapour. You hear a bang near the nose. You don't look. You can't look. You don't have time. You just wait for the follow-up. Smoke, fire, a sputtering engine. But it doesn't come. Not yet. You fly on. In a bomber, it's even worse. You're not alone. You've got a crew. But now there are 6 or 7 other people hoping the thin aluminum skin above their heads is enough to stop hot, jagged steel travelling at the speed of anger. There's no armour in the floor. No shield for the belly gunner. If something comes up through the bomb bay, it's all over. You hear the clatter of 50 cal guns going off in bursts. Defensive fire. The gunners trying to scare something away, or just keep their fingers moving. You feel it in your feet. The whole airframe vibrating every time they shoot. You wonder how many rounds they have left. You wonder if it matters. Then the light shifts. A flicker across the canopy. And you see another puff, almost dead ahead. The flak is closer now. Tighter. They've got your altitude. You pull a little left, then back right, trying to stay unpredictable. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to maintain course. But staying predictable is how they kill you. You try to thread the needle. It doesn't feel like a needle. It feels like flying through a junkyard with the lights off. Another impact. This time you feel it in your spine. Something slams into the belly of the plane. The nose dips for a second before the trim catches. Alarms flicker. Nothing steady. Just long enough to wonder if something vital got clipped. You ask the crew if they're okay. One guy swears. Another says he's fine. You don't ask twice. If someone goes quiet, you'll find out soon enough. You catch yourself hoping the guy loading the anti-aircraft guns below overslept, or miscalculated, or spilled his coffee on the fire control table. Maybe the rounds are duds. Maybe today's the day the math breaks in your favour. But hope is not armour. And prayers don't patch holes. You scan the wings. Still attached, no smoke. That's good. You smell something. Burned rubber. Fuel, hard to tell. It's always something. You tap the fuel gauge. It doesn't move. You tap it again. Still nothing. You pretend it's just stuck and not leaking. The flack keeps coming. It doesn't care that you've been up for hours. That your knees are locked. That your goggles are fogging and your hands are cramping and your nerves are fraying down to wire. It doesn't care that you haven't seen your family in a year. That you're barely old enough to vote. That you signed up because a recruiter made it sound like an adventure. It just keeps exploding. Indiscriminate. Relentless. Cold math from the ground, trying to erase your name from the sky. Another burst. Left engine coughs. Just once, then it's fine again. You note it, you add it to the list of things to worry about later, if there is a later. In the back of the bomber, the radio man is swearing. You hear him even over the roar. One of the antennae got clipped. He's trying to rewire something while the plane bucks and rocks like a canoe in a hurricane. You don't know what he's saying. It's all static. But the tone? You know the tone. It's the sound of someone realising their backup plan just went up in smoke. Eventually, you punch through it. The flak ends. You don't know how. You don't ask. You're not sure if the guns ran out of ammo or if they just gave up. You're out the other side, still flying, whole or close enough. You look around at the rest of the group. Fewer planes than before. You don't count. Not yet. Not until you land. The quiet after flak isn't comforting. It's suspicious. You brace for something else. Fighters, more bursts, engine failure. You wait. You breathe. You loosen your grip on the stick. Fingers shaking. Palms soaked. You made it. This time. But the next run is already waiting. And so is the next wall of fire. Because the sky isn't yours. It belongs to the ones shooting up. And you're just another target passing through. You land in one piece. Somehow. The tyres screech. The plane shudders. The nose dips. But you're still here. You taxi off the strip. Heartbeat still pounding in your ears. Your hand still gripping the stick a little too tightly. Like if you let go now, the whole thing will fall apart. The engine sputters once as it idles down. You don't even flinch. There's no cheering, no welcome wagon. Just a few ground crew walking out, squinting at the fuselage, already calculating the damage before you've even popped the canopy. You cut the engine, flick the switches off in a daze, and sit there for a second, breathing, or trying to. Every muscle in your body screams. Your mouth is dry. You don't remember blinking for the last 45 minutes. You slide the canopy back and climb out, slowly, legs wobbly, back tight, arms heavy like you've just done 100 push-ups in a sauna while being screamed at. Your boots hit the tarmac. Still real. Still solid. You turn to look at the plane. There are new holes. One near the wing root, another in the tail. Black soot stains under the engine cowling. A blood smear you don't remember seeing when you got in. You decide not to ask. The other planes come in behind you, the ones that made it. You count them automatically, then stop halfway through. You don't need the final number. You already know it's wrong. You already know someone's not coming back. And that's when it hits you. Not the flack, not the dogfight, not the engine failures or the stalling altimeter, but the slow, cold realization that you made it home and someone else didn't. Again. It always starts the same way. A roll call that trails off too soon. A bunk that stays made. A plate at dinner that goes untouched. The jokes feel different now. More bitter than funny. The laughter is louder, but only because it's working harder to cover something up. The camaraderie here isn't the kind they show in recruiting posters. It's not about shared victory. It's about shared survival. Shared trauma. A bond formed in a pressure cooker of noise and chaos and fear. You don't get close because you're told to. You get close because no one else understands what it's like to watch the sky explode around you while sitting in a flying tin can and pretending you're in control. You learn the rhythms of the people around you. Who curses when they're nervous? Who sings under their breath to keep calm? Who gets quiet before takeoff? And who starts talking a mile a minute? You know how the navigator holds his pencil like it's sacred. How the gunner always adjusts his helmet 5 times before strapping in. You know these people better than some of your own family. Not their pasts, not their dreams, but the things that really matter when everything goes sideways. You talk about the little stuff. Always the little stuff. The girl back home. The beer they used to drink. The car they were working on. No one says anything about death. Not directly. Not out loud. But it hangs in the air between every word. Every joke is an attempt to punch through it. Every story is a way to remind yourself you're still here. Until someone isn't. Then the jokes dry up. The energy changes. Everyone looks at the empty chair. No one wants to be the first to say it. But eventually someone does. A quiet, "He was a good one," or "hell of a pilot." And then silence. The worst part is that it doesn't stop the mission clock. You're flying again tomorrow. Or the next day. The grief doesn't get time to settle in. It just packs itself up in your flight bag and comes along for the ride. You try to compartmentalise. You fail. You try again. The best you can do is not fall apart while you're in the air. Survivor's guilt isn't loud. It's not a scream or a breakdown. It's quiet. It's waking up in the middle of the night because you thought you heard your dead friend's voice. It's pouring an extra cup of coffee and realising there's no one to hand it to. It's hearing laughter down the hall and feeling like you're not allowed to join in. You remember details you shouldn't. The way they laced their boots. The way they hummed that one awful tune before takeoff. The grease smudge on their helmet? You try to forget. You don't. It makes you superstitious. You start flying with the same pencil every mission. You pat the fuselage before climbing in. You avoid certain socks. You eat the same pre-mission snack, not because it helps, but because last time you did, you made it home. And that's all the science you need. You tell yourself that maybe this time, if you keep it light, if you don't get too close, it won't hurt as much. You try to keep a distance. You fail again. You always do. Because when someone laughs at your dumb joke just before you both take off into God knows what, it matters. That moment matters. You remember it, even when you don't want to. Sometimes you catch yourself feeling okay, not happy exactly, but okay. You laugh, you eat, you feel a second of peace. And then the guilt comes in, like it's been watching from the corner, like it wants to remind you that someone else didn't get to feel this, and that someone else might be you tomorrow. It messes with your head. It makes you reckless or cautious or both. It makes you double check everything twice and still worry you missed something. It makes you scared to sleep, scared to fly, scared to talk, scared to stop talking. It makes you wonder if the best version of you already died up there, and all that's left is what made it back down. But still, somehow, you keep flying. Not for glory, not for patriotism, not because of some speech you heard once in basic. You fly because the guy next to you is counting on you, and you don't let that guy down, even if he's already gone. So you tape over the bullet hole in your locker, you sew the patch back onto your flight suit, you clean your goggles, you crack another joke, even if your voice shakes a little. You do what you have to, because that's what everyone else is doing too. And tomorrow you climb back into the sky again. It's not something they tell you when you sign up. The pamphlets don't mention it. The training instructors don't explain it. Hollywood certainly doesn't dwell on it. But eventually, and not very far into your first real mission, you realise there's a question hanging in the back of your mind, quiet at first, then louder with every passing minute. Where the hell are you supposed to go to the bathroom? Because you're flying 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours straight. There's no pullover lane at 20,000 feet. No stewardess with a beverage cart. No lavatory with a polite little sign and a lock on the door. Just you. A barely padded metal seat. And a complicated flight suit that now feels like a prison made of zippers and terrible decisions. If you're in a bomber, you've got something resembling a system. Emphasis on resembling. There's a relief tube, basically a rubber funnel attached to a hose, draining outside the aircraft like a makeshift urinal that was clearly designed by someone who hated pilots. It's cold, always cold. The metal part freezes at high altitudes, and if you're unlucky enough to make contact with it, skin to metal. You learn the hard way what frostbite feels like in places you don't want to talk about. It's not private. There's no little door to close. You crouch behind a bulkhead, or in a corner, balancing awkwardly while the plane bucks in turbulence, trying not to fall over or knock into anyone else, or miss the funnel and turn the cockpit into a shared nightmare. Someone's usually watching, not intentionally, but because there's nowhere not to look. You both pretend it's not happening. Using it is a process. You've got layers, long underwear, flight suit, harness, flak vest, parachute gear. All of it has to be moved, loosened, or awkwardly shoved aside while you juggle a tube with one hand and try not to die of shame with the other. And time matters. The temperature inside the plane hovers somewhere between commercial freezer and Arctic wind tunnel, and exposure is not something you want to prolong. Sometimes the tube's clogged. Sometimes it's frozen solid. Sometimes the guy before you didn't quite aim correctly, and now the whole area smells like an outhouse at 30,000 feet. You consider holding it. You try. But bladder pressure doesn't care about combat conditions. It doesn't wait for a lull in enemy fire or a moment of steady flight. When you gotta go, you gotta go. If you're in a fighter, even worse, there's nothing. No tube, no corner, no time. You're strapped into a tight cockpit with nowhere to move, no ability to stand, and zero chance of privacy. Your choices are limited. Option 1. Hold it. Option 2. Let nature win and hope the insulation in your suit soaks it up without freezing to your skin. That's it. Those are the glamorous realities of being the tip of the spear. Some guys try bottles, canteens, empty ammo casings, whatever's available. But the cockpit is cramped. Movement is limited. And God help you if turbulence hits at the wrong time and you suddenly find yourself covered in your own tactical mishap. If it's the other thing, the bigger issue, there's even less to work with. There are stories, mostly whispered. Men using bags, newspapers. The occasional desperate solution involving a ration tin and a prayer. Nobody brags about it. No one writes home about it. But it happens. You're flying through cold, high-altitude chaos, and your body doesn't care what the mission objective is. When it decides it's time, it's time. And then there's the aftermath. Once you land, you crawl out of the aircraft, stiff and aching, and someone gives you a funny look. Not a laugh. Just a quick glance at the back of your suit, or the faint odour clinging to your gloves, and you know they know. But no one says anything. Because everyone's been there. Everyone's had a moment where dignity lost the fight against altitude and pressure, and 6 hours of cold coffee. The ground crew finds the mess. Sometimes it's frozen to the seat. Sometimes it dripped into the floor pan. They clean it up. Quietly. Without judgment. They've seen worse. They've smelled worse. It's just part of the job now. You try to laugh it off. Make jokes. Hydraulics leak in the cockpit. Someone says, "Pilot error in the lower deck." Another guy mutters. You force a grin, but part of you is still mortified. Not because it happened, but because you know it's going to happen again. Because there's no escaping it, no high-tech solution. Just your body doing what bodies do, in a place built for killing, not comfort. The worst is when you're flying with someone new, a fresh face, young, nervous. You see them squirming in their seat 2 hours into the flight. You know the signs. You pass them a wink. Maybe an empty can. Maybe just a nod that says, "It's okay, we've all been there." Because you have. Too many times. And still, you'd take that over the alternative. Over getting shot at mid-relief. Over trying to navigate a frozen urinal in a plane that's rattling like it's falling apart. Over having to clamp down, mentally and physically, while the world explodes outside and your bladder stages a mutiny. There's no dignity up here, no comfort, just necessity, and at 20,000 feet, necessity always wins. You've made it through the mission. Technically, the bombs are gone, the enemy fighters have peeled off, the flak stopped trying to dice you into pieces an hour ago, and the screaming in your headset has died down to static and the occasional exhausted sigh. You should be relieved. This is the easy part, right? Just turn the plane around and glide home. But that's the myth. The story you tell yourself to stay functional. Because the truth is landing, actual physical landing, is the final boss. It's not a victory lap. It's a test. One last chance for everything to go wrong. You're tired. More than tired. Your body isn't moving right. Your hands are cramped. Your legs feel like iron bars bolted to the rudder pedals. And your eyes are starting to gloss over from hours of squinting through smoke-streaked glass. You can feel the edge of your adrenaline wearing off, and behind it is a wall of fatigue so heavy you could lie down on the cockpit floor and not care if the engine's still running. But now's not the time to check out, because here comes the ground. And your plane, assuming it's still flying true, was never built to land gracefully. It was built to go up fast, carry heavy things, and maybe survive long enough to come back. The landing gear was more of an afterthought. You radio in, final approach. They acknowledge maybe. Or maybe the tower's half asleep. Or maybe the antenna's still fried from that flack burst over the river. You're on your own either way. You check your airspeed, then check it again. Then realise the gauge is jittering and you'll have to go by feel. Your hands shake on the yoke. Not panic, just worn out. Every bone and muscle argues with you as you line up with the runway. It's not a runway really, just a strip of uneven ground, rough tarmac if you're lucky, half mud if it's been raining, pockmarked by last week's crash landings. You can still see the gouges. You drop flaps, nose dips, you catch it. Your hands know what to do even if your brain's half fried. You throttle back, gently, then less gently when the left engine starts to sputter. The altimeter ticks down. A little fast, you correct, the wings level mostly. There's a crosswind. Of course there's a crosswind. There's always a crosswind. Like nature itself is trying to see how much you can take. You start your descent. Too shallow, no, now too steep. You fight the yoke again. The ground's getting close. Too close. You float for a second. A long, breath-holding second where everything is suspended in silence. Then the wheels hit. It's not smooth. It never is. First, the main gear. A bounce. Then the second impact. A hard one. Your teeth clack together. Your head smacks the backrest. The airframe groans. Something in the fuselage gives a metallic twang that sounds like it wants to break but hasn't decided yet. You bounce once, then again. You're not in control now, not really. You're just managing a chaotic system in motion, like trying to ride a refrigerator down a rocky hill. You stab the brakes, the tail comes down, the nose swings slightly. You adjust rudder. It swings the other way. You overcorrect. The whole plane fishtails down the strip like it's drunk and angry about being alive, but you stay on. Barely. You roll to a stop. The silence is louder than the engine ever was. If you're in a bomber, multiply all that by 10. You've got extra weight, extra crew, extra nerves. Landing something that big feels like trying to lower a warehouse onto a parking lot, using only string and prayer. If your gear holds, if your flaps don't stick, if the tyres didn't pick up flak shrapnel mid-flight, then maybe you'll stop before running out of runway. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes the brakes fade. Sometimes the tailwheel fails. Sometimes the hydraulic lines were hit, and you didn't notice until the gearlocks refused to engage, and the lights on the dash turned red, and your co-pilot turned paler than a ghost. Those are the landings where you don't roll. You slide. You grind to a stop in a cloud of smoke and sparks. And if you're lucky, you don't flip. Someone once said, any landing you can walk away from is a good one. That person had clearly never walked away from one with a twisted ankle, a nosebleed, and a smoke-stained uniform. It's a nice thought, but most of the landings around here don't feel good. They feel like a dare you barely won. You taxi in slowly, past the tents, past the mechanics waiting to see what kind of mess you brought them this time. One engine sputtering, the other howling. You pull into place and kill the throttle. Everything goes still. You don't climb out right away. You sit there, in the silence, letting your body remember how gravity works. Letting your heart rate figure out that it doesn't need to be slamming at 180 BPM anymore. You listen. Not to the plane, not to the crew, to yourself, just checking. Am I still here? Really here? Then you move, slowly. You unclip the harness. Your fingers fumble on the buckles. Your legs argue as you swing them out and touch down on solid ground. You almost fall. You hide it. Everyone does. You step away from the plane. You look back at it, this machine that somehow didn't kill you today. You pat the nose once, out of habit. You mutter something under your breath. Maybe a thank you. Maybe a curse. The line between the two is blurry now. You walk toward the debriefing tent, toward food that smells like disappointment and coffee that tastes like motor oil. Someone claps you on the back. Someone else lights a cigarette with hands still shaking. You all made it down. Not clean, not calm, but alive. And that's what landing is, really. Not a return. Just a slightly less violent part of falling. You're not even off the runway before someone's waving you toward the debriefing tent. No congratulations. No good job, champ. Just a half-gloved hand and a bored expression telling you to hurry up and go relive the worst 3 hours of your life in front of a clipboard and a half-broken wall map. You walk in, stiff-legged and sore, smelling like burnt oil, cordite, and stale nerves. The tent's hot. Always is. Feels like someone trapped a dying radiator inside and zipped it shut. The air's thick with the stink of damp uniforms, overbrewed coffee, and that faint background aroma of collective trauma no amount of ventilation can fix. The officer running the debrief doesn't look up at first. He's already scribbling something onto a form that probably says acceptable losses. A few of the other crews are there too, slumped in folding chairs, drinking from dented canteens, eyes locked somewhere 1,000 yards away. No one speaks. You don't need to. You all just flew through hell. And now you're about to be asked to explain the weather there. All right, someone says. It's never a question, just the verbal equivalent of cracking knuckles. Let's walk through it. They want specifics. They always do. Positions, timestamps, how many enemy aircraft, how accurate the flak was, what altitude you dropped the bombs, whether you saw the target hit, or if the smoke made it impossible. Like your adrenaline-soaked brain was keeping detailed notes instead of just trying to not black out in a screaming dive. You do your best. You mumble something about a bridge, or a train, or a cluster of buildings that may or may not still exist. Your voice is flat, not on purpose, just spent. You say, I think, a lot. Probably. Seem like. You're not being evasive. You're just not a camera. You didn't fly through that nightmare with a perfect memory and a slide rule. The intelligence guy, there's always one, flips through aerial recon photos and asks why you missed the drop zone by 200 yards. You resist the urge to explain that your altimeter was fried, your bombardier was half blind from smoke inhalation, and the sky was full of exploding metal and screaming. You just nod. Yeah, we were a little off. Someone else chimes in, talks about how they saw one of the new guys go down over the ridgeline. No shoot, no flame, just gone. It gets quiet after that. The guy's name hangs in the air like second-hand smoke. No one says it, you all know who they mean. The officer scribbles it down. Probable loss. That's the term. Probable. As if there's a version of the story where he's just walking back through the camp right now, whistling and covered in soot, saying, "You won't believe what happened." Then they ask the worst question. Any injuries? Like they mean physical. Like they care about anything they can't tally. You glance at your hand, the skin raw from gripping the yoke. You think about the way your heart still hasn't found a normal rhythm. About how you haven't slept properly in weeks, and how your dreams are just louder versions of what you saw today. No, you say. We're fine. The form gets another check mark. Everyone's fine. Always are. They pass around photos. Did anyone see this building still standing? You stare at the blurry image, black and white and smudged, like you're supposed to remember if that was the one you aimed at while dodging tracers and trying not to vomit. Maybe, you say. Could have been. They ask how many fighters you saw. You say a few, even though you stopped counting after 6 because you were too busy watching the guy on your wing catch fire. They ask how many you downed. You don't know. You weren't looking. You were trying not to become one of them. 1, someone says quietly. I think I hit one. Everyone nods. You let them have it. That's how these things work. Even if it's not true, it helps. Then comes the quiet part. The after-action stare. They give you a minute, let you sit there in the silence, let the exhaustion settle into your bones like dust in a tent flap. Someone starts shaking their leg. Another guy rubs his eyes until they go red. No one breathes too deeply. They ask about damage. You rattle it off like a grocery list. Port engine took a hit. Oil pressure dropped. Control surfaces were slow. Radio was out. Left wing's got a hole the size of a dinner plate. You could go on. You don't. They nod, jot it all down, like they're writing up a car that needs an oil change, and not a flying wreck held together with bullet patches and cursed luck. Sometimes the brass comes in. Wants to observe. They don't say anything. Just watch. Occasionally nod, like they're going to take this information and feed it into a machine that will somehow calculate better odds next time. You ignore them. They've got clean boots. Someone mentions the weather. Cloud cover was heavier than expected. Everyone agrees. The forecast is always wrong. You say it like it's a joke, but no one laughs. You're too tired to fake amusement, even for something that used to be funny. Eventually, they let you go. You sign something. Maybe it's a mission report. Maybe it's just more paperwork to bury what actually happened under a pile of standard engagement forms. You don't read it. You just scribble your name and stand up. Outside, the sun's still too bright. You blink against it, like you've just crawled out of a cave. Your legs ache. Your knees pop. You walk back to your tent in silence. No one talks on the way. You don't need to. The debrief wasn't for you. It never is. It's for the next mission. The one they'll brief you on tomorrow morning. The one they already know half of you won't come back from. The one you'll fly anyway. The day ends, technically. The sun goes down, the tents get dim, the mess hall quiets down to the clatter of tin trays and low muttering. People drift back to their bunks. The war, allegedly, hits pause for the night. But you don't sleep. Not really. You lie down. That part's easy. You stretch out on a cot that feels like a hammock made of fence wire and mould. The canvas sags in the middle and pinches your back in two places, neither of which correspond to any normal human anatomy. Your boots are off, but you're still half dressed. Too tired to change. Too wired to relax. The blanket doesn't help. It's thin, damp in the corners. Smells like 6 months of nervous sweat and kerosene. You pull it over yourself anyway. The routine helps, makes you feel human, sort of. But your brain, still airborne? The engine noise never stops, not in your head. You can feel it behind your eyes, buzzing in the soft tissue. Your ears ring. A high whine, like the props are still spinning right outside the tent flap. You try to ignore it, but it grows louder in the quiet. It becomes the background hum to your thoughts. Like your skull is still flying at 15,000 feet, while the rest of your body is trying to remember how a pillow works. You close your eyes. Immediately, you see flack. Black bursts behind your eyelids. The kind of sleep that feels like you're still dodging something. You jolt awake after 2 minutes, heart pounding, no idea why. You listen. Silence outside. No alarms. Just whined against canvas and a cough from the next bunk. But your chest is tight. Your hands are clenched. You lie back down and pretend that helped. Someone nearby is snoring. Someone else is talking in their sleep. It's not words. More like mumbles and fragments. Half-formed pieces of the mission still playing in their head. You recognise the sound. You've made it too. Somewhere between dreaming and reliving. It's always the same reel. The takeoff. The smoke. The moment the sky turned into a trapdoor and gravity dropped out beneath you. You try rolling over. Doesn't help. The cot groans. Your knees ache. Your shoulders feel like someone took a sledgehammer to each one just for fun. The muscles between your ribs twitch every time you breathe too deep. You grab the pillow, or what passes for one, and try to mash it into a shape that supports something, anything. You catch yourself counting propeller rotations in your head. That's not normal. You do it anyway. 4-blade, 1,200 RPM. You're not flying. You remind yourself. You're not flying. But the rhythms are burned into you now. The way the cockpit vibrates, the pitch of the throttle, the moment the engines whine right before takeoff, it's all still there, still running on loop. When you finally start to doze off, it's not restful. It's fractured. Micro naps. 10 minutes here, 5 there. You surface with a gasp, roll over, start again. Your dreams are noise, not images. Just the sound of wind shearing across a canopy and gunfire rattling through metal. Occasionally, someone's voice cuts through. Sometimes it's your own. No one sleeps well in this place. You can see it on their faces in the morning. Red-eyed, pale, hair sticking in all directions. You trade yawns like currency. Sleep okay? Someone asks. You just blink at them. What does that even mean anymore? Sometimes someone knocks themselves out with whiskey, the cheap stuff, the kind that tastes like punishment and burns the whole way down. You'd think it helps, but mostly it just makes the dreams louder, like opening a door and yelling, "Hey, trauma! Come on in!" The worst nights are the quiet ones. No mission scheduled. No bombers idling on the strip. Just stillness. And in the stillness, everything you've been trying not to think about shows up. You see faces. Hear laughter. Remember jokes from guys who didn't come back. And underneath it all, that hum again. That low-frequency growl of an engine at cruising speed, just waiting to take you out again tomorrow. You miss normal noises, city noise, home noise, dogs barking, radios playing something besides static and orders, even the creak of a floorboard under your bed. But here, it's wind, tent flap, and the phantom roar of a 4-engine bomber still rattling around inside your head like a trapped bee. Sometimes, on really bad nights, someone walks the compound. Just loops around the tents, over and over. No destination. Just movement, like if they stay still, the memories will catch up. You think about joining them. You don't. You just lie there, sweating under a thin blanket in 40-degree air, waiting for morning or orders, or just for the ringing in your ears to go away. Eventually the sun starts leaking in through the edges of the tent. You haven't really slept, but you'll get up anyway, because the next mission's already being briefed. And the engine in your head? It's just getting started. It starts the same every time. A knock at the tent pole, a clipboard, someone with a bag slung over their shoulder, and a look that says they've got better things to do than play mailman in a war zone. Mail call, they mutter, like it's some normal Tuesday back home. Like this is a post office, not a staging ground for airborne disaster. Everyone perks up, just a little. Eyes flick toward the door. Someone sits up straighter on their cot. Someone else mutters, "Finally." You wait, half hoping, half dreading. You don't want to admit it, but there's always a little cold pit in your stomach as they start reading names. Each letter called is a name of someone still alive, still here, still breathing. It's quiet, ceremonial in a way no one planned. If a name gets called and there's no answer, that's its own kind of silence. Eventually, they get to you. "Got one," they say, tossing a folded envelope with smudged ink and creased edges onto your bunk. You stare at it for a second, like it might explode, like the words inside it might be the thing that finally breaks you in half. You don't open it right away. You hold it. Feel the weight of it in your hands. Light, but not. The return address is familiar. Always is. A sibling, a parent, a girl, someone you don't know what to call anymore. The writing's neat, or it used to be. The ink's smudged where the envelope's been rained on, or dropped, or maybe just handled too many times by hands that shake more than they used to. Eventually, you tear it open. And that's where the real mission starts, because the words inside are from another world. A world where no one's shooting at you. Where breakfast is a thing people talk about, not just chew on silently while checking their parachute straps. They write about groceries, about the neighbour's new dog, about a local wedding you were supposed to attend last summer. Someone got promoted, someone else got engaged, someone had a baby. Life is still happening, not to you. They ask how you are. They always do. "Hope you're keeping warm," they write, having no idea that your boots froze solid 3 nights ago, and you had to sleep with your socks on your hands just to keep feeling in your fingers. "Hope the food's okay," they say, not knowing you've eaten the same powdered eggs for 3 days straight, and they now taste like chalk dipped in regret. They mean well. Every word is soaked in care. You know that. You appreciate it. But it doesn't make it easier. Because the whole time you're reading, there's this pressure behind your eyes. Not tears. Not quite. Just that slow, creeping weight that builds with every sentence. You don't belong in those words. Not anymore. You're not part of the stories they're telling. You're a ghost orbiting a life that kept going without you. And the only part you get to play now is the one they all worry about. Sometimes they say it outright. "I pray for you every night." We're so proud of you. You read it, then look at your hands. Grease-stained, blistered, still faintly shaking from the last mission. And wonder if they'd still be proud if they saw the version of you that lives here. The version that forgot how to feel anything between panic and exhaustion. The worst letters are the ones that arrive late. Way too late. Ones where someone writes about that guy in your crew, who they assume is still around. The one who didn't make it. The one who caught flack over the water and didn't even get a proper shoot out. Tell him I said hi, they write. You don't. You can't. Even worse are the letters that say nothing. Just empty optimism. Sunshine through a filter. You know they're holding back. Editing themselves. Not telling you about the funeral, or the illness, or the thing that went wrong because they think you can't handle it. Like being shot at regularly somehow makes you fragile. And maybe they're right, because when the letter ends, when you fold it up and tuck it away into the little pouch inside your duffel, or slide it under your mattress, or just sit with it in your hand, staring at nothing, that's when it hits. Not just sadness, not just homesickness, it's fear. Because now you've remembered what you have to lose. And up there in the sky, that's dangerous. You try not to think about it, but it's too late. You start calculating again. Not just fuel and flak and enemy routes, but odds. If you die tomorrow, how long before they find out? Will someone write back? Will the letter make it home first? You wonder if you should stop reading these altogether. Some guys do. They call it distraction. Others read them twice, 3 times. Memorize every line, whisper it under their breath like a prayer. But the fear's always there now, sitting just behind the eyes, coiled around your lungs, whispering at the edges of your thoughts. And the next time someone says mail call, you'll feel it again, hope and dread, at the exact same time. The thing no one wants to admit, not out loud, not in a briefing, not even over bad coffee at 3 a.m, is that the enemy you worry about most isn't always German, or Japanese, or wearing any uniform at all. Sometimes the thing that's going to kill you is the very machine you're trusting to keep you alive. Because let's be honest, your engine doesn't care if you live or die. You learn that fast, usually the first time it coughs at 10,000 feet for no reason whatsoever. One little sputter, one hiccup from the prop, and suddenly your brain is calculating terminal velocity while your hands go white-knuckled on the yoke. Is it fuel? Oil pressure? A spark plug? Is this how it ends? Not in a blaze of glory, but with a loose fitting and a tired machine. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The guy whose engine just quit mid-mission. One moment cruising, the next plummeting. No fire, no warning. Just dead silence where there used to be noise. That's the worst part. The silence. Because when your engine goes quiet up there, the rest of the world gets very loud. But the real terror isn't dramatic like that. It's subtle. Creeping. It's the slow realization mid-flight that something's off. A vibration that wasn't there yesterday. A needle drifting just past normal on the temp gauge. A strange smell. Maybe oil, maybe burning fabric. Maybe something you've never smelled before, and hope never to again. You ask the flight engineer. He frowns, taps the dial. Nothing changes. Probably fine, he says. Probably. That's the word that follows you like a curse. Probably just the cold. Probably some carbon build-up. Probably won't fail. Probably doesn't mean much when you're 50 miles out, and the nearest safe landing strip is a concept, not a location. And don't get comfortable if it's a new aircraft either. Those fail just as often. Fresh off the line, still wearing factory grease, already rattling like they've got something to hide. They don't have to be old to be dangerous. They just have to be poorly maintained. And with the speed these birds are turned around, maintenance sometimes means a guy in a jumpsuit slapping a wrench against a cowling and muttering something vaguely optimistic. You start listening for sounds you shouldn't have to think about. Whining, clanking, the subtle change in pitch that says a valve is about to give up. You become hyper-aware of temperatures, oil, coolant, cylinder head. Things you never cared about before this war turned you into an amateur mechanic with PTSD. Every system is a potential traitor. Carburetors jam, fuel lines leak, superchargers seize. You learn how long you can run without them, how high you can climb if one engine dies, how to feather a prop, when to shut it down, how to milk a dying motor just long enough to cross the channel, or find a flat enough patch of dirt to crash into. Sometimes it's not even the engine, sometimes it's hydraulics, or electrical, or the control surfaces, rudders and ailerons and flaps, deciding they'd rather not respond today, thank you very much. You bank left, nothing. You bank harder, still nothing. You kick the rudder. The plane lurches like it's drunk, and decides it wants to dive instead. That's when you realise you're not flying it anymore. You're just along for the ride. You start flying differently, cautiously. You ease into turns. You nudge the throttle instead of punching it. You watch the gauges more than the sky. Because now you know this plane can betray you. Not because it hates you. Just because it's tired, like you. That's the part they don't prepare you for in training. That your own aircraft might be the thing that kills you. Not enemy bullets, not flak. Just stress fractures and skipped inspections. Just metal fatigue and design flaws. Just bad luck. And when it happens, when something really does go wrong, there's no drama, no music, just noise. A pop, a bang, a jolt, a sudden lurch in your stomach as the nose dips or the wing drops or the entire cockpit fills with smoke. And then it's just you, gripping the controls, trying to remember everything you ever learned about emergency procedures, while your brain yells one long, uninterrupted, "Oh God!" If you're lucky, you get it down. Maybe you limp back to base with one engine coughing and the other overheating. Maybe you skid in on a dead stick and roll to a stop in a trail of smoke and oil. And maybe the ground crew says, "Damn, that was close." And you just nod and say nothing because you're still trying to breathe. If you're not lucky, you become another story. Engine failure over the channel. Didn't make it back from patrol. Probably mechanical. Probably. You start to hate that word more than the enemy. So, yeah. The Axis is dangerous. The flak is terrifying. The fighters are brutal. But it's your own engine, the guts of the thing that's supposed to bring you home, that keeps you up at night. That makes you second guess every hum and hiss and twitch of metal. That reminds you over and over that survival up there isn't just about skill or courage. It's about whether the machine feels like working today, and it's been flying a lot longer than you have. Eventually the missions stop. You finish your tour, or what's left of it. Maybe you made the full number. 25, 35, whatever the goal was for your unit before they bumped it higher again. Or maybe they grounded you after that one mission where your plane landed with half a wing and blood on the bulkhead. Either way, at some point someone says, "You're done. You should feel relieved. That's what everyone expects. That's the line they feed you. You made it. You're one of the lucky ones. Congratulations. But it doesn't feel like relief. Not exactly. It feels like you've stopped moving and the rest of you hasn't caught up yet. The ceremony is small. Maybe just a few officers lined up in front of a flag, someone reading your name off a clipboard with the energy of a guy reading a grocery list. You're handed a medal, maybe two, maybe a certificate folded once, already yellowing at the edges. There's clapping, but it's quiet, tired. The same kind of clapping people use when they're just waiting for their turn to get through it and go back to their bunks. They pin the medal on your chest. Bronze star, air medal with clusters, maybe even a distinguished flying cross if the paperwork moved fast enough. You feel the weight of it, not the metal, but what it's supposed to mean. You try to match the expression they're expecting. Not too proud, not too blank, just appropriate, whatever that means. Someone shakes your hand. Says, "Well done, son." Someone else hands you a drink, or a cigarette, or a look that says, "Now what?" You don't know. Because medals don't fill the space left by the people who didn't make it. They don't replace the piece of you that stayed behind in a bomber seat or a cockpit or somewhere above a field in France. They don't cancel out the noise still ringing in your ears or the dreams that still wake you up in the middle of the night with your hands clenched and your mouth full of dirt. But they do look nice in a drawer. You pack up, slowly, like you're moving out of someone else's life. You fold your uniform. You collect your gear, the parts you're allowed to keep. You slip the medals into a bag next to the last letter you got from home. It's creased and sweat-stained, and you've read it 100 times. You'll probably read it again on the train. When you leave the base, no one waves, no one salutes. People are coming and going all the time. You're just another shape in the crowd, another name on a roster that will get boxed up and filed away in some metal cabinet that no one's going to open for the next 60 years. You make it home, eventually. Maybe by rail, maybe by boat, maybe on a flight that actually lands the first time without blowing a tyre. There's a sign in someone's window. Welcome home. There's cake, or pie, or just a handshake and a seat at the table that's been waiting for you since the day you left. You smile, you eat, you talk. A little. But you don't say everything. You can't. Because how do you explain it? The noise, the blood, the freezing cold in your boots at 18,000 feet. The fact that you still flinch when you hear thunder because it sounds too much like flack. That certain smells, oil, smoke, wet wool, can turn your stomach without warning. That you haven't slept through the night in months and probably never will again. You don't. You say it wasn't so bad. You say we got lucky. You say glad to be home and hope no one sees the edge in your eyes when you say it. Time goes on. People move forward. The world changes. The uniforms get boxed up. The planes get retired, parked in dusty museums or stripped for parts. The letters get tucked away in attics. The medals stay in drawers. And you fade with them. They make movies, write books. Most of them get it wrong, too clean, too heroic. They leave out the parts where you cried into your mask at 12,000 feet because you thought the fuel gauge was broken and you didn't want to die thinking about it. They leave out the itching, the cold, the guilt, the silence after you land. They never show the engine noise in your dreams. Years pass, decades. Eventually someone asks you about the war. Maybe a kid, maybe a stranger at the VFW. You tell them a story, a small one, harmless, The time someone forgot their helmet and had to borrow one 2 sizes too big. The time a pigeon somehow flew into the tent during briefing. You leave out the other stuff. You always do. Because the truth is heavy. It doesn't belong in casual conversation. It belongs in the cockpit, in the tent. In the silence between 2 guys lighting cigarettes with shaky hands and not saying what they're really thinking. You don't need to be remembered. Not really. You're not looking for a monument. You're not chasing a statue or a speech. All you ever wanted, really, was to get through it, and maybe to never have to do it again. So when they forget, when the names blur together and the photos fade, and your medal winds up in a pawn shop or a museum with bad lighting, you're okay with that, because you remember, and maybe that's enough. So that's what it was like, or close enough. You flew, you froze, you bled. You prayed the engines would hold, the flack would miss, and the day would end with your boots still on solid ground. And when it did, you counted yourself lucky, even if lucky meant limping home in a plane held together by oil leaks, duct tape, and blind faith. There was no glory in it, no soundtrack, no slow motion heroics, just noise, repetition, malfunction and fear. Just men, too young, too tired, too scared, doing something no sane person should have been asked to do. And now it's history. A few lines in a textbook, a mention in a documentary, some forgotten photograph with names scrawled on the back that no one alive remembers. The medals tarnish. The stories get cleaned up, sanitised, decorated with flags and fanfare. But the truth is quieter. It sits heavy in the silence after the mission. And it doesn't care if anyone's still listening. Sleep well, or try to. The engine's off. For now.